Hey everyone, welcome to our April Baton Rouge HomeActivito.net user group. My name is Brian McCoy. I will be your host tonight. We have two awesome speakers. One will be, I'm going to say her name wrong, but I hope she doesn't get mad at me because I keep asking her, Lucia, talking about the TEALS program for Microsoft. And then Stacy Vicknair. Some of you may know him from the Baton Rouge area. Let's see what else. So, like I said, my name is Brian McCoy. I am your host slash co-leader of the user group. I also have Andy Andrews with me, as well as Jeremy Knight. Andy will be helping relay chat, whatever questions you may have, answering whatever, moderating, banning people. So stay humble out there. And then we have Jeremy who will be running the stream for us. So I always appreciate the help that they provide. Let's see what else. Please utilize Twitch for any questions you may have. We also have our Discord channel. If you're looking for a link to that, there should be one below. So the best way to keep up with what's going on with our streams coming up will be through Discord. It's a good way to chat with everybody. I also see some people out there saying, hey, so how are y'all doing tonight? Thank y'all for showing up. We appreciate it. Without viewers, it'd be pointless for us to be standing here or sitting here or whatever our guests are doing. Let's see. I'm go through my notes to make sure we have everything going on. As usual, we're looking for speakers. This is a community-run channel for the community by the community. So if you want to get involved, or if you want to get your face on Twitch or YouTube, by all means, reach out to us. We will set up a time, give you an opportunity to do a presentation. We've also started producing additional content. So last Sunday, we did Sunday before last. We did our first Sunday morning stream. It was just kind of the test out, but we got some pretty good feedback. So hopefully, we'll continue to do that. This Sunday, I'm actually planning on doing some Azure Function stuff. So feel free to tune in Sunday morning around 9 a.m. If you're interested in viewing that and hanging out. What else? Other than that, that's about all we have. So I will go ahead and toss it to our first speaker so that she could tell us about the TEALS organization or program coming to Louisiana.
All right. Thank you so much, Brian. You did pronounce my name wrong. It's Lucia, but that's okay because I'm just so grateful for all that you've done to help me spread the word about the TEALS program launching in Louisiana and just kind of letting me know, like where folks are. So thank you so much for letting me be in this .NET user group tonight. I am going to go ahead and share my slides. I'm going to try not to bore y'all. Definitely please throw questions in the chat as they're coming up for you. And I hope that folks will narrate because I'm not good at looking at the chat and doing a presentation at the same time. Can you all see the slides right now? That's fine. Nobody needs to see my face.
Yeah, just 1 second, guys. We'll get this transferred over. It's nothing like doing live production. There we go.
We're good to go. All right. Awesome. Thank you. All right. Thank you all so much for letting me be here this evening. I'm really excited to tell you about the Microsoft TEALS program and what we're hoping to accomplish for students in Louisiana. And I'm coming to you all because the Microsoft TEALS program is 100% based on the participation of volunteers who get involved and support local schools and students. So without further ado, I will say a bit more myself. I forgot to put this here. So I'm Lucia Berliner. I'm the regional manager for the TEALS program here in Louisiana. Before joining the TEALS team, I was a classroom teacher. And as a teacher, I was just constantly trying to figure out how to get my students, out into the community, and importantly, how to get the community in, because I cannot tell you what a difference it makes for a student when they go from seeing their teacher that they see every day to seeing somebody from the real world, who can really tell them what it's actually like out there. They have a whole different respect for people who are not their teachers in the classroom teaching them. So to start, I just want to share a little bit about computer science education in Louisiana and more broadly. So as we all know in this call, the number one new source of jobs in America right now are computing jobs. There's going to be 400,000 current openings, which is quite a bit. But to juxtapose that, currently only 47% of high schools in the US are offering computer science. If we zoom down into Louisiana, it's actually less than 25% of high schools that are offering a foundational computer science class. So something else that I just like to really look at is the AP scores, because that's a national score or a national test. Whoops, this is on a timer. So in Louisiana, the state is from 2019. Of the 850 tests that were taken, 93 were taken by Hispanic students, 147 were taken by Black and African American students, and 255 were taken by female students. So there's a huge disparity in terms of who is even getting access to those limited computer science classes that are being offered, and we have a lot of work to do to make sure that the field is more inclusive. So the TEALS program approaches this by engaging volunteers to work with high school teachers to co-teach computer science classes. It's a community of volunteers and teachers that are working together, and it's really focused on that goal of making sure that computer science classes are accessible to high schoolers across the board so that they have that exposure and they know if this is a field that they really want to study and get involved in. As I mentioned, volunteers are the foundation of the program. TEALS volunteers in general are bringing the subject matter into the classroom. So most of those teachers that we're working with, they really have no background in CS. They're usually math teachers or science teachers or sometimes business or even English teachers that get tapped to teach the CS class, but they don't know how to program. And as you can imagine, if you don't know French or Spanish and somebody asks you to teach that, programming is kind of the same for a teacher that doesn't know anything about programming. So having those volunteers come in and bring the subject matter is huge for the teachers and for the students. Of course, the teachers are still bringing the teaching expertise, managing the classroom, doing all those teacher pieces. When we look at the impact of TEALS, I mentioned this is going to be our first year in the state of Louisiana. So more broadly, we've been around for a little over a decade and worked with over 85,000 students. But you can see on the map here, there's a few new regions that have the stars. So we're expanding specifically into Tennessee, Mississippi, and Louisiana, our 3 brand new regions, as well as Florida, and then growing in DC and growing in Georgia and Alabama. I'm also just pointing out that we really do have a focus on making sure that the schools that we're serving have a majority of students identify as Black or African American, because when we look at the industry, there's a huge gap in that diversity in terms of who is in the field, and a big piece of that is who's getting access to CS when they're in high school. I feel like I'm competing with the timer here. This is the worst when you forget to turn off your timer. So as far as the way the program works, it really sets up the volunteers for success. So every single volunteer that works with the TEALS program, you sign up, you submit an application. The application is not to really evaluate you, but just to make sure that we can match you with a school that's got your skill set and that matches the way that you want to volunteer. So if you want to be an in-person volunteer versus a remote volunteer, if you're comfortable with teaching Java versus Python, or maybe you would prefer to teach the AP Computer Science Principles course, which is more of a survey class. That's really why we have volunteers submit that application. We interview every single volunteer that submits an application. Again, that's part of the matching process. And then once you are interviewed, we pair you with the school. And then you do some summer training with the teacher and the other volunteers that you'll be co-teaching that class with. So it truly is a team. And a part of that is because obviously as a volunteer, you're not going to be able to be in a school full time teaching a computer science class. So you are really trading off with those other volunteers that you're working with. All of the schools are offering the computer science classes as first period classes. So you can get in, volunteer either remote or in person, and then you can go to work and get there at a reasonable time. Every volunteer and teaching team has a regional manager, me, that's going to be working with you, visiting the class, checking on you, and just available, for any questions, concerns, help that you might need. And then, of course, there's the broader TEALS community. So we do quarterly meetups. This year, of course, they're remote, hoping to return to in-person for next year. In terms of what your week as a volunteer working with the TEALS program actually looks like, it's about 1 to 3 hours a week of preparation. So that could be getting your slides ready, meeting with your teacher, giving feedback on student work, that type of kind of teacher work. Just, in general, messaging your team, collaborating with your team, making sure everybody knows what they're teaching the next time that they're going to be in the class. And then in terms of instruction, we ask volunteers to be in the class 1 to 2 times per week to actually teach that class. So volunteers do get to pick also if they're more comfortable in a teaching assistant role where they're more working, to support students in small groups, or really that teacher role where you might actually be standing in the front of the classroom and delivering that lesson. I do just want to show what the remote model looks like. Sometimes I feel like people, less now that we've been through a year of COVID, but people are a little bit less familiar with what that might be like. Students have headphones, you're kind of beaming into the class, just like beaming, I'm from Star Trek, just like you would, for a work call, and working with the students in that way. Some volunteers do prefer this because you don't actually have to travel to the school, and it's just a bit more flexible in terms of timing and fitting into your schedule. So this is something they're interested in. I hope that you will get involved. You'll help spread the word like Brian has been so wonderful to help do. You'll be like Andy and you'll say, yes, I'm doing this, and submit an application. You can find the application at our website at www.microsoft.com/TEALS. Or you can reach out to me directly if you've got additional questions at lucia@tealsk12.org. And we really are hoping that you'll get involved. In Baton Rouge for next year, we've got one high school that's going to be in the cohort. It's Terra High School. They've got 2 teachers that want support. They're both so incredibly sweet. One of them is teaching AP Computer Science principles. She taught it for 1 year, but she doesn't really have a background in CS. So especially the programming was really challenging for her to deliver to students. And she's really looking for the volunteers to help her get better at that and her students. The other teacher is also incredibly lovely. She's a business teacher currently, and she's going to be teaching their Intro to CS class, which will be taught in Python. And that teacher, she has no background in CS. She's never taught it before. So she's looking for volunteers that are a little bit more excited about actually teaching the class to the students. So it'll be great. And if you're thinking remote, we do also have some other schools in Louisiana, primarily in the greater New Orleans area for next year. I will also just put one plug that if you know a high school that wants help offering or starting their computer science program, also reach out to me because we'll be starting to recruit schools again in the fall, and I'd love to have them on our list of schools to reach out to. Finally, if you wanted to hear more about this and perhaps hear from a previous volunteer, I've got 2 upcoming info sessions that are going to be a bit longer that you can come to. The slides will not be advancing automatically, so you can take a screenshot of this, which is going to be on April 28th. And I'll give a second if you want to do a screenshot. Or you can also find me on LinkedIn, and Brian's been awesome about resharing a lot of this stuff as well. Or right here. The other one's going to be May 11th. So if you've got questions, please drop them in the chat right now. I'm happy to answer them, or else you can follow up with me via email. We are so grateful to everybody who does get involved with the TEALS program. And for Terra High School, I will just say they are looking for 6 volunteers total that are going to help that school. So hopefully some of them are here tonight. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on and giving us this information. You actually answered the questions that I had. So I don't know what else I could have done. I know we have some people in here who are outside of the Baton Rouge area. So, hopefully we can cover a little bit more of Louisiana. Are there any other, is it mostly greater New Orleans, Baton Rouge area that you are trying to cover right now? Or is there any other areas of Louisiana that you're going to?
Yes, thank you for that question. So for this first year, we've got 7 high schools total, which is actually more than I thought we were going to have for the first year. 6 of them are in the greater New Orleans area. Then we've got the one in East Baton Rouge. We do have one other school that I haven't been able to reconnect with that submitted an application in northern Louisiana, but I'm just not sure what the status of them is going to be for next year. So I don't want to say for sure that they're going to be in. But yeah, thank you so much.
Awesome. Good to know. Does anybody else have any questions that we can relay? If not, like I said, or like Lucia said, I share all of her stuff. I know how to get in touch with her if you missed any of the information. So I'll be happy to relay any questions you have or provide you with any information that she has provided with me already. Again, we're here to support the community the best we can. So yeah, if there's anything that we can do to help, just let us know. And I'm happy to hear that, things are going in the right direction, that you're actually getting some volunteers, and hopefully we can bring more computer science classes to Louisiana. So, yeah, I guess with that, again, thank you so much, Lucia, for coming on. We really appreciate it. And we can start with our main presentation if I don't see any questions. So.
No, I just want to say I'm so excited that y'all are doing this in Louisiana. Whenever Brian first told me about it, that first day I applied because I have been wanting something in this area, in this region for that. So thank you.
You were the first applicant for Baton Rouge. So thank you. Super excited. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, then. Well, Stacy, if you want to go ahead and share your screen, we'll get to our main presentation tonight. And
all right.
So, see, how's everyone doing out there? Everybody surviving the weather? I know we're worried about technical difficulties. This is live, so if we disappear, hopefully we'll come back soon. But
all right, can you see my screen? Okay, can you hear me? Okay.
Let's see. We stay agile.
Absolutely, we can see you well.
Okay.
Thanks.
Brian didn't give me any feedback there.
Well, I was sorry. I was waiting. I was waiting. I know we have a lag on the stream, so I was waiting for it to come up on the stream, but I don't see it yet.
Oh, I got you.
Yeah, there is an issue on the stream. Hold on just a second.
We hear you, and I'm just gonna dance around. So shout out to the Ticket Angel for coming. I don't know if he was expecting that to be called out on here. But we will not be talking about custom keyboards tonight. However, we do have an ongoing.
It's on my first slide. It's right there.
I know, that's why I'd raise mine up, but it'd be a little bit. I don't know if you can see it. So, but yes,
I have a habit of trying to match it to my company colors, which is expensive if you change companies. Which is what happened recently. Changing companies, I had to get a new key set.
Yeah, have y'all used the aerodynamic keyboard? I know some developers use those. I've tried those. I love my mouse, my trackball mouse, but I can't handle it all. But they're supposed to be better pestering for us.
It looks like we've successfully transferred over. So Stacy, it is all you, my man. All you, my man.
All right. Well, my name is Stacy Vicknair. You may know me as Ticket Angel, as Brian mentioned. For those who don't know what that means. For SQL Saturday, for years on end, I made the mistake of offering to select the raffle. And what ended up happening was I made a big show of it one year, and it was expected every other year after that. And then you know what happened? I got it canceled. Never going to be another SQL Saturday. That's a joke. I'm kidding, but I am retired, I think. But these days, I work as Director of Web and Mobile Development at Paperless Environments. I joined the company. Paperless Environments is a company that does document management and indexing, and they provide that as a service, but really it's an on-premise software today. Over the course of this year, my main goal coming into this organization is to take that and bring it to the cloud. And my LinkedIn is Stacy Vicknair. Before I go to the next slide, I will say that I tend to do experimental topics, and that's kind of what this is going to be today, which is I like to make comparisons between things and see how it goes. I appreciate you coming along for the ride. I hope that there's something of value to get out of this. I feel that maybe if you have questions, I might be able to elaborate and hopefully fill in some gaps that I might have in the presentation. Just keep that in mind. But to start, if I click on the right screen, I'm going to have a bit of a prelude. This will be the equivalent of your short film on a Pixar movie. And it's going to almost be my own lightning round because I think that it's important to talk about why I like analogies. And for examples of why are proof that I like analogies, I kind of do topics like this fairly frequently. One of the quote unquote famous ones I've done is for our speaker idol. I've done the physics of human potential, which is taking human potential and comparing it to the equation in physics of potential energy. And it actually has been a pretty decent topic to give at the Baton Rouge.net user group. I've given it a few times, and it seems to be enjoyed. And then for SQL Saturday, the presentation I did was comparing people management to being a dungeon master or game master in D&D. And I think the reason I do this is a fewfold, but one of the reasons I think I do this is because I have to help myself understand the topic, and I find that I understand the topic better if I feel like I can relate it to something I know and that I can explain it to someone else. And I get to do both of those things with analogies, but I'm actually going to talk about another reason, which is going to be sort of an analogy. And we're going to talk about double entry bookkeeping. If you're familiar with accounting, it's a fairly common practice that's used in accounting, which just means that whenever you're keeping track of something, you keep track of both the debit, where it came from, and the subtraction of that amount from that source, and the credit, where it goes, and the addition of it to that new source. It's not too important to know exactly what it means, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about the history of it. It can be traced back to 70 AD, roughly. There's a version of this sort of bookkeeping system that is called tabulae rationum. And there's a quote, this was kind of in the Roman times, and the quote that was used to describe it was, one page all the disbursements are entered, on the other page all the receipts, both pages constitute a whole for each operation of every man. And that's kind of the earliest recorded transcription or description of something that was like this double entry bookkeeping. And then sometime around 1000 BC, Korea invented something that was basically not based on or not derived from the Greek version, but they kind of came up with the same idea themselves. Later on in Genoa, they had a system called Masari, which was in 1340-ish. And that was the first time it hit into the Europe areas. It became pretty prevalent in Europe in 1500 BC, and then it's still something that's widely used today in terms of accounting as a profession. The reason I bring this up is because if I were to chart the history of our profession on this same timeline, that's us right there. It accounts for about 10%, 20%, if we're very generous, of the timeline of what accounting had as just part of the invention of how they operate. And when we think about that, it's impressive how much we've accomplished or how much we've actually created for ourselves in the time that we've existed, because it hasn't been that long. If we're being moderately generous, we can trace it back about 80 years, which is to when assembly language was created. Fortran came not too much after that. If we want to be super generous, we can track it back to Ada Lovelace and give her credit for the fact that she invented an algorithm of sorts before she even had computers. And that would double this line, but it's still fairly generous. So to me, and for our industry, because we're so young, we need analogies. We need to be able to compare ourselves to other things that have existed well beyond what we've existed and be able to learn from it. And we do it commonly. We do it with architecture. We do it with lean manufacturing. We do it with rugby, Scrum, and also occupational safety. When we start talking about psychological safety and how we do blameless retros and things like that, a lot of that comes from occupational safety, where if a person makes a mistake, if a person goes and they hook their gas mask up to something that's not oxygen, they don't get the opportunity to learn from that mistake they made. Other people have to be able to learn from the mistake they made. And it's just it's how we survive in our industry. We're going to continue to grow as rapidly as we have. So that's the side note to that, to what we're going to talk about today, which is, for once, how about we use our own stuff as an analogy for something else, which is organizational design. Excuse me 1 second. So that gets us to the main presentation, which is talking about organizational design, which is as we grow, as we add members to our teams, how they grow. And how we can take some of our best practices from coding. I'm sort of focused on object-oriented coding and those sorts of things, and how they apply to building a team sustainable flow. All right. And by the way, Brian or whoever's going to read questions, I'll try to stop and pause for questions at the end of every sort of section, if that makes sense. And otherwise, we can answer questions at the end as well.
Two things. One, I turned off your video for your actual
It was
Webcam?
taking up too much.
Well, not just
Or it
that.
started
It was
acting up.
it was acting up. The NDI was acting up. I think it's a Skype issue.
Okay.
And two, we're gonna be queuing up questions. We can
Okay.
actually display them on screen now. So we'll that's perfect if you want to take them at the end.
Okay, I can take them at the end. I don't have the stream up whatsoever, as long as that's clear.
Yeah, I just want to make
Right.
sure that people know
Okay.
what question you're answering.
Oh, I got you. All right. I'm just going to start answering questions, frankly, Jeremy. You're going to have to deal with that.
That works.
All right. For our agenda today, for the actual portion of the presentation, we'll talk about why we're even talking about object-oriented organizational design. And then I chose 3 things to try to focus on in this system to sort of limit the presentation and to make sure that I could actually complete something in time to present to you today. And then we'll go over a quick review. We'll just re-review the agenda. We'll talk about references and resources, and I'll have a link to this presentation in the presentation if you have a QR code reader at the very end that you can get to it, and I'm sure they'll share the presentation other ways. So why are we even talking about this? It's a good question. And we're going to start with what's called Conway's Law. And Conway's Law is something that says that an organization will design systems that will produce, that will basically be a mimic, or their structure is a copy of the organization's communication structure. Meaning that when we design software systems or when we create systems, they actually oftentimes will reflect the team structures or the structures within our organization, which are also usually a reflection of the communication structures within our organization. A good example is, for instance, when we have more sort of separated teams where there's a separate DB team, there's a separate UI team, there's a backend team, then there's a good chance that those teams themselves will have very defined separations between their layers, where a DB team is responsible for the database, and they kind of have to, they're not so much working together closely as one has to be done before the other can get done, etc. From another source or another book called Organizational Patterns of Software Development, there's a similar quote, or a quote in the same vein, that says that if the parts of an organization, its teams, departments, subdivisions, do not closely reflect the essential parts of the product, then the project will be in trouble, and therefore make sure the organization is compatible with the product architecture. So the reason, I'm going to check my next slide. Okay. The reason that we're talking about this is because there's already a natural relationship that exists between our systems that we create and the organizations that we live in, because our systems will sort of naturally tend to look like the communication structures we have within our organizations. So that said, we'll talk about 3 different object-oriented principles, and we'll try to translate those into a meaningful way to look at how teams grow and how you might structure or approach team growth. We're starting with single responsibility principle because really this is the one that's going to get us from being a team of 1 to a team of many. And we'll talk through that. So if you're not familiar with single responsibility principle, it's one of the solid principles. These came from Uncle Bob Martin, right? Someone correct me if I got the wrong Martin. No, it's Uncle Bob. Uncle Bob is where these came from. Originally came from his book, Agile Principles, Patterns, and Practices. That was eventually rewritten in C#. I recommend that book. It'll be in the resources later. But what it says is that a class should only have 1 reason to change. And what I actually really appreciate and what stuck with me for the longest time is that in the book, they talk about how a reason for change is really an axis of change. It's a vector for change to happen. And the more vectors for change to happen that you have, the more likely it is that when changes need to happen in that code, it becomes cumbersome to deal with. And it may actually result in something where you end up breaking the expectations of some of the other reasons it might change. And that sort of coupling leads to dangerous things. And like it says at the very end there, fragile designs that break in unexpected ways when changed. Now, it's unrealistic to say that we can have teams that do just one thing unless we're at an enormous scale. Once you get to that level of scale, then maybe you can have teams that only focus on one thing. But really, the translation we have here is to what we would call cognitive load. And this is a term that comes from a book called Team Topologies, another book I really recommend. But cognitive load is just this concept that our minds can only handle so much. And the ways that it can only handle so much could be the languages that we use, someone focusing on front end versus back end, someone focusing on mobile, native mobile, someone focusing on machine learning, things like that. Is chances are, if you can focus on all these things, you're amazing, but I cannot. And chances are that you focus on a subset of these things which fit into your mind that you're capable of doing. And chances are you also have a specialty, something that you're particularly good at, that you work with more commonly. Another area that cognitive load comes in is also just how much of the product do you have in your brain, and how much are you capable of having in your brain. For very sizable products, I used to work for NetChecks, which was a human capital management company, payroll, time and attendance, etc. Each of those are fairly large domains. Payroll especially is very complex and it has many different areas to it. And you can't really understand all the aspects of that reasonably well. And really, as a company grows, you have to divide out so teams can focus on some smaller areas than just the whole product like that. And then also the responsibilities and roles within the team. Again, if you're a very small company, meaning you have 1, 2, 3 team members, there's a good chance that those folks are sharing responsibilities around development, testing, product ownership, design. Oh, give me 1 second. About to sneeze. All right. Oh, man. It's really trying to get me. Of course, right in the middle of the presentation, right? Okay. Well, chances are in a small organization, you'd be responsible for a mix of those things. But as a team size grows or as things grow, it becomes cumbersome for every person to have that sort of responsibility. And it makes more sense for people to specialize over time. And that can still be distributed within a team. But that's something that typically will be sort of separated out the larger your organization gets. Actually, okay.
While you're at a stopping point, I'm turning your video back on. I figured it out.
Okay, good. So they can see me struggle through my next sneeze attack live. Cool. So as a team grows, when you're talking about a solo team, and this is just some advice for someone who might be in this situation, and really I think about this in different roles too. Say you're a manager of a team, or say you're a director, and then things grow even larger and you're going to become higher than a director or something like that. The way I approach this is try to track what I do, try to give a percentage to how often I spend my time on each of those things, and then think about the roles that would actually take that on if the team was larger. So you may find yourself doing some work that is particularly reporting heavy, or that someone might take on from more of a BI standpoint. You may be doing some things that are more on the operations side or the DevOps side that maybe there would be a DevOps engineer doing, or a site reliability engineer or something like that. But just think about not necessarily the roles up front, but what are all the things I do? And then if I were to try to take those and spread them apart into different job descriptions, where would they land? That's one way to approach how you can split. And then initially, especially at a smaller team size, say you're one person, generally you can try to complement yourself, meaning try to portion away some of that percentage of what you do so that someone else could take it on fully while you take on the other parts fully, and split those responsibilities. But overall, once you start to get to a size of 4 or so, then you can start looking at how you can build in more redundancy. So people who are doing the same types of things, for instance, multiple front-end engineers or multiple back-end, multiple full stack, multiple QA, whatever it happens to be. Then what I've been told is the hardest hurdle, and I can agree from experience, is getting from a single team to more than one team. is a task where now you have this team that you built, and you want that team to continue to flow and be able to do work, but you also have this need to take time from the team in order to build up more. And this first bullet point I have here, if unable to hire entire teams up front, split on the redundancies. And redundancy sounds like a harsh word, but it's really just, frankly, it's disaster recovery for an organization, but it's also just a matter of having that availability is also how you get away from thinking about individuals, meaning a team where you only have one person who can do a thing is a team that when that guy takes vacation, you're kind of lost until they come back. So building up teams that allow people to take vacations while worrying is a wonderful thing. But back to this point, if you can't just hire an entire team, meaning you didn't magically get budget or you didn't start a new series or whatever it happens to be, then focusing on splitting on those redundancies you built in helps, because then you could maybe fracture off to 2 teams of 4, which wouldn't be ideal, but it would be something where you have a team that can function, and then you can hire into those teams to grow them. The other points to make are that when you're growing teams like this, what you want to try to do is make sure that you're not disrupting teams as much as you can, because you want them to get work done. And hiring is an expensive and time-consuming process for people of your team, potentially, depending on how involved you keep them in the process. So ideally, what you want to do is create a situation where you can flow people, have one team that's moving while you're building up another team, and try to just keep those teams flowing. And then this final part, as you split those teams, it makes more sense to try to look for areas that you can split them based on what areas of the product you might be able to split. Or I use the term platforms here just to mean maybe there's a case where it makes most sense for you to split out your mobile team versus your web team. Or for our case, for instance, we have one large team. It's probably at the point where we'll split in the near future. And maybe one of the ways we would split is for folks to work on desktop and have a desktop team, but then the other team being web and mobile, or a mix of web, mobile, and backend. Oh, clicked the wrong place.
I had a quick question while you have a pause, though, and that's the thing that I would also imagine that sometimes when you have people with more diverse skill sets and you're splitting up a team and you're trying to get that out, I would imagine you have people that work on both teams. Is that something that is common? And
So what I would say is that it can work, but it probably shouldn't be permanent, because it becomes difficult when you have people who work across multiple teams, because their prioritization is going to be coming from different places. And potentially, if priority is driven by the team, meaning that each team has a product owner or someone who's saying, hey, here's a priority, they're going to have to make decisions, or someone's going to have to help them make decisions about what's more important or what gets to give in that moment. It probably creates a little bit more friction than you want long term, but obviously anything kind of depends on what your situation is and what makes the most sense for you to bridge that gap. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, oh no, see, I had these slides backwards. Or I just did this really weird. I think I did this really weird because I was looking for this image and then I did not have it on the last slide. Let me check something real quick. Yeah, see, this slide probably shouldn't have been there at all. Well, that's a bummer. So this was what I wanted to show earlier, and then that's why I was confused. I forgot to delete a slide out of here. I'm totally sorry. And this sort of fidelity picture here, which bonus points to those who recognize the image, is to demonstrate the growth of team size. So when you're one person, you're really muddled on what you're doing. You're doing a lot of things that are probably roles that different people can take on. And as a team grows, you probably have some shared responsibilities, but you're also you're also starting to divide to where there are some redundancies and whatnot. And that kind of continuously grows to where team size will continue to evolve, but specialization also tends to grow as an organization gets larger. And the point I was trying to make with this is that, and where I've seen it happen is, depending on the size of the org that you're a part of, sometimes you'll have someone come and interview where they did a very specific thing for their job and their role at the company that they worked for that doesn't quite fit for, a company that's being scrappier or at a smaller size where you need them to really take on many different responsibilities. And it's a sort of an inevitable change, and it's not really a bad thing either. It's just something that over time, as you build up that specialization, it is something that you're allowed to do a little bit more when you have a larger organization size. This is particularly why it's rough in the early transition period when you have a small number of teams, is because you have to bridge the gap between moving to higher specialization and getting people out of the comfort zone of working on all the things and more into just picking sort of a road to work on while going through that growth, and that becomes tough. So I kind of already went over from a team to a few teams, right? Yeah, I did. So we'll skip that to beyond a few teams. And a lot of the same considerations from going from a single team to a few teams are still there. But the main difference is that focus on certain products change, consider shifting product areas over shifting people. The point here is that teams get to gel, or they start to gel as a team. It's a slow process, and adding and removing team members actually costs more, or it causes that flow to stop kind of heavier than just giving or expanding or shrinking the boundaries of the work that they have. And products themselves also have natural life cycles. There is certainly support for products, but there is also some items that you can just put on the shelf because they're done, they don't really change, and they're not adding workload to the team that's responsible for them. So over time, it makes more sense to shift the product areas rather than shifting just people across teams, and then focus on hiring and focus on hiring two specific teams to avoid disrupting other teams. So let's talk about abstraction. I'm going to go heavily into just talking about team topologies at this point, and talking about these two other aspects of it. So now, from now on, this first part, we were talking about how teams grow. And from here on out, we're talking more about what happens when we have a large number of teams and how do they work with each other. And when we talk about abstraction, what I think of when I think of abstraction is the ability not to care about what's happening when I'm using something. And I also think of cohesion, which to me means that if I'm using a class, I want the interface it provides to me to be cohesive, for it to make sense amongst itself, for nothing to be at a different level of abstraction that I don't understand, and for nothing to really be leaky or show me the underpinnings of the class that I'm working with. And to me, when I think about how this translates to teams, I think about autonomy of the team. And I think the team should be independently capable of delivering value, or they should be able to release their own content. They should be responsible for their own maintenance and bug fixing and whatnot for what they create. And they shouldn't have to rely heavily on outside teams in order to perform day-to-day work or to release their code or things like that. Obviously, companies work in different ways. This is a very DevOps-focused statement that I'm making. And it also is just more about the idea that whenever you want teams to be accountable for what they do, if you only have a team that does feature work, then they aren't going to have to worry as much about the quality of what they deliver because another team's going to be responsible for maintenance, and that's not necessarily an ideal situation. And if you create walls, meaning ops is responsible for deployment, and that's a completely separate team from the team that's doing the work, then again, you've created a boundary that says that if something goes wrong during a release, maybe the wrong person's, maybe not the right person is on the call or is available for that release. And from team topologies, they talk about and posit that there are 4 team types. They talk about stream-aligned teams, which are generally what you might call a product team, or a team that's just focused on a single valuable stream of work, and being able to deliver that from concept to production. Another team, which is very similar, is a complex subsystem team, which just means that sometimes within a certain stream or within a product, there might be a part of it that is so complicated that it in itself requires its own team because the product knowledge is so heavy, because the tool set is so specific or distinct, whatever it might happen to be, because the business logic is ridiculous. You can think of, for instance, a payroll engine. If I have a team that's dedicated to payroll, I might be able to have a team that's just focused on the setup, like the screens that do setup, the screens that prepare you for the process. And then I might have another team that is solely focused on the engine itself because it's a very complex system. Platform teams are really teams that enable other teams to do work. And the real distinction here is, again, that these other teams technically depend on the platform team, but they don't really depend on the team. They depend on what the team creates. And that platform team should be striving to create a platform for them, something that they can self-service, something that they can use by themselves without really having to work hand in hand with the platform team all the time, something that's basically an API for them to consume. And then enabling teams are really teams that are intended to help other folks learn to be self-sufficient in something that might be a specialty. An example of this might be, say you're making a move to cloud. You might have an enabling team whose sole purpose is to help other teams for a period of time learn how to move all their infrastructure, what they have, into the cloud. And then from that point on, that team is responsible for the team that just moved all their stuff to the cloud is still responsible for it after the fact. The enabling team's responsibility was for helping them get up to the point where they could move forward with it on their own. So inversion of control, and also I kind of link this in with the concept of loose coupling as well, which, if you're familiar with inversion of control, which is very much more common these days, it's so baked into most of the systems that we use now, whereas opposed to when I started, because I'm old, it wasn't nearly as common. It was more of a nice thing to realize that people know about. But when we talk about inversion control, what that really means is that whenever I have a class or when I have something, it shouldn't really depend directly on an implementation. It shouldn't be newing up, quote unquote, something that it depends on, but rather it should depend on an abstraction. And then when we talk about dependency injection, that means that whatever that abstraction is then ultimately provided for it through some sort of system, meaning that it says, hey, if you want to talk or if you want to work with me, these are the things I need, please provide them, rather saying, hey, since I'm being started, I'm going to go grab all these things directly, and I know explicitly what I'm coupled to. I probably didn't do the best job of explaining that. It's not quite the purpose of today's presentation, but hopefully that will suffice. And when we start talking about inversion of control for teams, I put here is as a service, but it's really about the communication flows for teams, is that as we have more teams, collaboration is great, but it really needs to be purposeful and controlled, meaning that if I as a team have to collaborate with 8 teams every time I go into a sprint or every time I'm doing work, then chances are I'm not being as successful as if I could have a contract between me and these other teams for communication. It doesn't mean that there aren't times when collaboration makes sense, but it does mean that it should be a purposeful decision to collaborate directly with other teams. And to go back to team topologies on this one, they state in their book that there are 3 interaction modes that they would expect or see. Collaboration is working closely together as if on a single team. And that's usually a great way to get a lot of things done, but it does blur the boundary of who's responsible for what for that moment while they're working together. The risk there is that maybe they end up tightly coupling what they've done on their teams if they're not careful. But the benefit is that they're going to get a speed boost and they're going to be able to work together well. They just have to be careful about that. How most teams should really operate with each other is to treat each other as a service, meaning that I as a team have done something to create a developer experience that you can use without really having us to collaborate strongly. And that might be an example of a team that provides an API that another team can tie into. That might be an example of providing as a service services for the platform, or let's say from an infrastructure or operations side, having it really easy for me to go and spin up something in the cloud because I can just go to a portal that's been created that helps me as a developer do so. Those become services where it doesn't mean that we have to collaborate to get things done, but rather I can easily just get those things done without having to work with the other team hand-holding the entire time. And then facilitating is primarily what we'd see in that enablement team, but enabling another team to deliver work with substantial autonomy, meaning that facilitating is kind of the version of collaboration where I'm helping you do the thing. We're not really collaborating together as much as I'm helping you figure out how to do something and figuring out how you can own it as you move forward. So that's it for this conversation. Hopefully it wasn't too boring or anything like that. Hopefully there was something of value for you all in it. And just to go over what we talked about why we're even having this discussion. We discussed Conway's law and the fact that naturally our code is going to mimic the communication structures that we have within the organizations we're part of. Then we talked about single responsibility principle, but really we talked about vectors for change and the fact that teams have a cognitive load that they're capable of. Individuals do too, but teams have a certain amount that they're capable of, and it's dangerous for us to bridge that. And we should also look at what those different forms of cognitive load are for ways that we can split teams apart as a company grows. We talked about abstraction and the fact that let's see, I lost my train of thought. We talked about abstraction, which is really to say that teams can have specific types and that we shouldn't really have to depend on other teams in order to accomplish things, or we should be purposeful when we do have those moments of collaboration. Most of the time, we ought to be able to see a clean abstraction from a team that's responsible and able to do their own things. And then we talked about inversion of control, the fact that teams shouldn't be heavily dependent on each other, but they should be loosely coupled for most of the time that they operate. However, sometimes collaboration is a necessary part of how we communicate as teams, but it should be done so in a purposeful way. And now we're going to get into the final part, which is the references and resources. I have a few links here, which are just things that I looked up and quoted from throughout this presentation. But I'm going to go through each of the books that I talked about individually, starting with Team Topologies. This was probably what I would consider one of the best books that I read. I think in 2019 is when I read it. I would highly recommend it if you ever see, well, one, if you feel like you see dysfunction in your workplace about how teams are operating, this is a great book to form opinions about how you think it could be better. And two, if you see yourself growing into a position where eventually you're going to make these sorts of decisions, it's also a great book to have in your repertoire. The next one we talked about somewhat heavily is Agile Principles, Patterns, and Practices in C#. I recommend this for anyone who's a developer. I think the equivalent might be clean code if you prefer. Who wrote that book? Someone tell me.
Same person.
Oh, it was the same. Ah.
Well, I think technically his son rewrote the C# Agile patterns, principles, and practices.
Yeah, his
It
name's
is
on
true.
here as well.
The son helped with the conversion to C#, but yeah, it's the same guy. But this
I
is
was mentally.
this is
what's
my
that?
number one recommendation still
Yeah.
to this day. Anybody that says, "What should I read?" This book right here.
I was mixing it up between clean code and what's the other one?
Code Complete? Yeah.
Yeah. Mentally, I mix those up. Thank you for helping clarify that for me. But anyhow, yeah, this is a great book. It's what introduced Solid. It's out of order in the book because the acronym wasn't there before the book, but it is what introduced that concept. Here's another book called An Elegant Puzzle. And this is an engineering management book, but it's a really interesting book to read, especially if you're not necessarily yet in engineering management. It still covers a lot of topics where you can kind of be super helpful for your team, for your boss. And it's a super pretty book, as you can see from its cover. The concepts, it talks about a lot of the concepts that we talked about early in the single responsibility of when you're growing a team early on and you're making those decisions, and how do you not interrupt the flow of creating teams. But it also covers a ton of different topics related to engineering management, which could include hiring, doing migrations meaning large code migrations from one platform or one solution to another. And then this organizational patterns of agile software development. I'm including this book in this list because I did quote from it, but I did not actually read this. I found the quote from Wikipedia, but I feel like it's only fair to list the book here. And then finally, if you scan this QR code, and if I did it well enough, then you should get to this presentation. That bit.ly link will also bring it to you. It's not a Rickroll or anything else. It is this presentation, and we'll also provide the link in whichever way makes sense in the future. So thanks for coming along with me on this experimental journey. And what questions do we have?
I just want to add, your presentation was super awesome. A while back, I did a presentation on microservices architecture, and I brought in Conway's law. So when I saw that, I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to enjoy this presentation. I think you put this together so well, and I love just all the stuff that you put in here. So I just wanted to give you some just confirmation on that. You did an amazing job with this. So thanks for sharing all this. It's been great.
I appreciate it. I feel like I'm rolling the dice sometimes when I make a presentation. So I appreciate that.
But yeah, some of the stuff, I was reflecting at Paylocity that we do, and that was one of the questions I asked about the bouncing between teams, because we've tried that before, and it's that's exactly what we've experienced, is it's too much.
Yeah.
One of the things I would also add too is we tend to be like full stack developer.
Yeah.
And I see like some people want to try to get that full stack developer and kind of make your teams that way so everybody does everything. But I do also see how that can hinder teams, because you have somebody that's a specialty and it's harder for them to grow on a team and specialize in areas. So I can definitely, that kind of added some perspective to me.
Yeah, but there's a difference between fully cross-trained and specialized, right? So like just because somebody can pick up a piece of code doesn't mean they're going to be specialized in it, right? So like having somebody that can do that's a back-end developer but has a little bit of cross-training in the front end is still a risk management piece, right?
Yeah. Well, what I'd say is most of my experience has been full stack, meaning most of the teams that I've worked with have been full stack. Even here at Paperless, we have folks who are semi-dedicated to one stack or the other, but usually they have experience in something. My belief is that even if you're full stack, you probably have a specialty. You're probably stronger on back end, stronger on front end, whatever it happens to be. You probably have something that you do personally well. But at the same time, you probably also can't get into the depth that you hope for in one or the other when you're forced into a full stack situation. So I'm interested to see, now that we have this sort of movement at Paperless, is we're going to try to focus on having folks be front end, back end, etc. I'm interested to see how it works, because frankly, most of my experience has been in what you described, more full stack folks.
I think with that experience too, like when you said that, I was like, ooh, I wonder how that's going to kind of work out too, because I do like being on the full stack teams because of that, because everybody kind of, anybody can work a story on the team. So, I mean,
and down here, I think it's a bigger issue, right? I mean, one of the things a lot of people don't really talk about, but I mean, we're in South Louisiana, hurricanes hit us, natural disasters hit us all the time, and it actually becomes part of your business recovery, your disaster recovery strategy, right?
Yeah, it can. I mean, like I said, on our team, or at least the folks who report to me for the most part are remote, and remote's helping a little bit. But you're right. If you have a very highly geolocated team, I guess, it is a risk. Maybe that's why it's so common down here, I guess. What other questions we got?
It's a knowledge management thing too, though, right? I mean, that's that old, if somebody get hit by a bus, like what happens, right? Well, you always want somebody with that backup. Knowledge management's a huge piece in risk management, right?
So, and I'm not advocating for not having redundancy, because obviously once teams hit a certain scale, like say you had 8 people on a team, you almost certainly don't have a lack of redundancy in the team. You probably have at least 2 of front end. You might have more front end than back end, or vice versa. And in our situation, we have a desktop side, and the question is, are we going to have a team that is just dedicated to a fraction of our product that is inclusive of desktop, or do we actually make a separate desktop team because they're working on a different thing? The problem is that then we've already created a surface area where those teams have to collaborate. Because if we need feature parity between the teams, that's going to be a constant problem. But the other interesting problem for us is that we also have 2 release cycles. I kind of think of it like, Azure DevOps, but I think it's not the same as Azure DevOps and DevOps Server, because we have some resources that can be shared between our on-premise clients and our web-only clients in the future. But web, it's really easy to release at any time. On-premise, someone's got to go install something. So keeping that parity is one thing, but also making sure that we don't break something because we've updated something on the web that someone who has an on-premise version actually depends on. Is going to be one of the hurdles of what we do.
Yeah, I want to add something that Mike, you said in there, support rotations, etc. I do. Yeah. I just have something to add about it. I think it's good to kind of rotate teams. At the same time, I'm going to tell you, I've moved to 3 teams at Paylocity, and it's large. We have a lot of teams and a lot of collaboration, but that there's a benefit and there's a pro and con to moving people around on teams, because you go through that storming, norming, performing stage every time you kind of shake out a team and that collaboration effort. So you can spread out the knowledge, but they also have that kind of loss of like, now you're ramping up and somebody new on a team, and it can slow down your production.
I didn't bring that up, but that's exactly what I had in mind when I was saying to favor changing the product area that teams are responsible for over actually moving team members, because it's very costly to kick a team out of flow or to get a team out of its gelling stage, because you've removed somebody from the team or you've added somebody from the team. All of those events hurt it, and even changing the boundaries of a team's responsibility when it comes to product hurts it in that same way, but it's less cumbersome, or it's a smaller ripple than changing team members.
Yeah, and I'm going to respond to Mike's comment too about keeping manager continuity. That one as well, I have experienced. For me, sadly at Paylocity, most people don't experience like I do, but I've gone through so many like PTLs is what we call them, it's just managers, and it can be tough, especially for as you're going through different managers and you're building up that rapport. So that really affects your team to have those managers switch out a lot. But if you're growing fast, you're definitely going to have growing pains. So, you definitely have to put your resources where it best supports the product and the teams.
So I'm guessing, Mike's in the comments.
Mike's in the comments. He's got a few of them in here. He's kind of agreeing with you on a lot of these things, which is why I haven't
that's great.
pulled any of them in. They're not really questions. They're more just collaborative statements towards your statements.
That's fair. No, Mike has been a mentor in my career, and I'll say this every time I know Mike's around. He's someone who I value and appreciate so much. So that's cool. I'm glad he's here.
Yeah, we're gonna have to get him. We're gonna have to get him in a Skype call here shortly if he keeps blowing up chat like this.
Yeah, I actually legitimately feel like I'm missing out because I don't get to see his chat right now.
It's all right. We always have an open spot for you here, Mike, if you want to get on.
So. I have to hit him up too because I'm considering bowling, Mike. So just let me know.
Oh Lord, you're going way to his heart, right?
Mike, it's that product that your company owns that they kind of don't ever do anything with.
So we got our first question. What is Skype? So we're going
Nice. That's great.
Yeah.
That's Mike.
We tried.
We have a Teams account, so we tried that. But yeah, no, this has been really good. It's been eye-opening for me too because I think I was one of the ones that I was quote unquote full stack, but in my position I was the only person willing to touch JavaScript. So I became a front end developer who really loved the back end. So, and I think to this day, I focus mostly, even though I'm not a fan of doing front end development, I've done mobile clients, I've done a lot of React, a lot of Angular. Now I do a lot of Blazor, and now I do a lot of APIs. I got moved to a platforms team, as you mentioned earlier. So we start to move to that type of dynamic, but it's really interesting to get your take on it. And I think somebody else, it may have been Jeremy Cronin. I know he's out there. Shout out to the man behind the scene who sends all of y'all emails. He mentioned that I'm going to copy and paste this link and I'm going to send it to my manager as soon as we publish this on YouTube. And probably a couple other people in the organization who because you have that dynamic of nobody understands what a platforms team is, where they become the Band-Aid, where, hey, these other product teams or whatever you want to call them are falling behind on work. So we have a platforms team that can step in with no business knowledge, but theoretically just go in and do all the work that's needed. So,
and those two words you just said are really the key behind all the cross training that he's talking about. If some people didn't get it, that business knowledge is really the biggest part, right? Because how many people in the world have your platform of choice knowledge? It's the really, really crucial part inside of a business is to make sure you keep that business knowledge in house no matter what happens.
Nice.
This has been so. I think we're gonna have a managerial roundtable later this year. So look for the invite to that if you But orgs they're growing constantly now and quickly, and now with the onboard of remote workers and all the technologies that get thrown at you constantly, these are conversations that need to be had before it gets out of hand. So
cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'm glad you guys liked it. I didn't know what the outcome was going to be, but I feel like that with all my presentations. So maybe that's just me. Anyhow.
So I think at this point we could probably just take all of Mike's comments and turn it into a presentation on its own. So he's gonna get mad in a second and stop talking. And
yeah, when you rewatch it on Twitch, doesn't it redo the comments?
It does.
Right? Yeah, because I'm probably gonna do that later now.
The problem is, let me warn you. I don't know how long our account can hold the VOD, which is why we push them over to YouTube as fast as we do. So you probably want to catch it within the next 7 to 14 days if you really want to catch everything.
Okay.
I think it's
cool. I should be able to do that. 7 to 14 days isn't bad. You're not telling me like you should probably watch it in the next 60 minutes or it's gonna disappear.
And to be real, I don't know what that limit is. I haven't gone look at it because we tend to just push it to YouTube like day of.
Yeah, my Saturday stream from 2 weeks ago is still up. So you could catch it on Twitch for about 2 weeks and then it'll go away. And then you could catch it without comments on YouTube. So
yeah, I may look at a way to integrate the comments, but it'd be kind of hard to.
Yeah.
I think I got some space.
And he signed up to be a TEALS volunteer. So shout out to all the people who signed up. I know Lucia has gone, but make sure y'all keep stay on the lookout for opportunities like that come to the Baton Rouge area or whatever area you happen to be on. So
yeah, Mike, you can go back and watch it. It was really like the first 5 minutes. If I don't remember how long a Twitch clip can be, but if we can actually cut that into a Twitch clip, I might actually do that because it might be short enough, and that would actually be permanently hosted on Twitch, and then once we have the VOD on YouTube, so it would be in 2 places.
No, definitely. So yeah, so if y'all missed that, go back and catch that. Be sure to volunteer. I think Andy mentioned it in the chat this Sunday. I'll be here on this channel messing around with Azure Functions. So if you want to come watch me stumble through code, you can do that. It's kind of a continuation of the static web apps that I did 2 weeks ago. So shameless plug for myself. I'm just joking. But if anybody else is willing to come on, by all means, like I said, it's a community channel. I invite you to get with us and we can set something up. So if that's something you're interested in.
He's like, come pair a program with me.
Basically, yes. So
yeah,
please.
If I'm around, like I said, I wouldn't mind hanging out, doing that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
That's great.
Sounds good. So y'all have anything else? I don't want to kill the conversation too soon, but I know.
I've got the Discord link. I think one of the things that I'm gonna take away as an action item from this one is I'm probably gonna start working on the bot so that we can have a Discord command and a YouTube command, all that stuff. That way people can quickly get to everything. I think that'll help out a lot.
Yep, Jimmy, if I can do anything too to help out with any of that stuff as well, just let me know if you want to Zoom or just have some, knowledge share on that as well.
Yeah, I can definitely transfer some knowledge after I figure it out, because this is one of those things that'll probably be like a 1 o'clock in the morning kind of thing.
Yeah, I totally understand. I'll let you figure it out first. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, we can learn together. We could do an impromptu presentation. So nice.
All right.
Well, all right, fellas, but I'm gonna drop. It was fun. It was great presentation too.
You want me to give it back to you, Brian?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead and throw it this way. Thank you so much, Stacy. We really appreciate the info. I went into this blind for anybody to know. I just said, hey, Stacy, you're talking this month. Congratulations. I don't care what your topic is. I just need you to show up and say words. So this is what you got. And I'm very excited that it worked out like this. This has been one of the more engaging conversations we've had. We've also have our local celebrity, Mike Huguet. I assume he's still local in the audience. So thank you for showing up. Jeremy Cronin, I always forget to shout you out, but thank you so much for everything you do with, Facebook updates and sending out newsletters. So, and what website updates. So please, people, sign up. We have a newsletter, BRDNUG.org. You can go there and sign up for the newsletter. We also have our meetup you can sign up for. You can get into Discord. There's all kinds of ways to find us, to reach out to us. We want to be a community for you to help, learn and build your career, make connections. There's some great people in our community, and I really appreciate everything they do. So with that, let's see. Yeah, Mike, you could see this massive streaming studio I have. It's about, look, I'm touching the walls. You and I together, buddy. I got a mic. We can do this. So we'll figure it out. I've been vaccinated, so we're good.
Nice.
Anyway, yeah. So Anyway, thanks for everybody for showing up. We'll post the VOD on YouTube as soon as I figure out how. And I hope to see y'all either this Sunday or next month. Remember, every second Wednesday of the month we'll be here. So with that, I'm signing off.
All right.